beautiful as the day I lost you.
Shut up! I'm not gonna cry, you're gonna cry. I'm so happy he's back.
Hello, my fellow hunters! I hope you are thoroughly enjoying Title Update 2. I know I certainly am. But outside of new monsters and features, the one truly always exciting thing is new weapons and armor. Will it change things? Will it alter our bestest, most metarist sets? Well, today, I'm here to answer that question, at least when it comes to what Lagiacrus is offering us. His unique weapon skill and his unique set bonus. Now, to get ahead of myself a little bit, both are actually filled with potential, and in some cases, you have an argument for them to be, honestly, the way to go. But there is some caveats. Let's get into the numbers and what's actually going on here, and you will see. But bottom line, compared to Mizitsune, whose weapon and armor skills were kind of like, how do I put this? How do I put this in a nice way? Garbage. They were absolutely garbage. What? This time, we have something to be excited about. So beginning then with the weapons. Convert thunder resistance then. So, this increases your weapon's elemental attack proportional to your thunder resistance. Thanks. That's, okay, cool. It's doing a thing for me. What exactly is that thing then? Well, before we look at that thing, we do need to touch on the actual weapon. As I said in my initial impressions, it's obviously not as good as Artian at a baseline. The skill, decoration, space, economy is slightly worse than Artian, even with focus being the apt choice on the weapon. Of course, that doesn't apply to all 14. Not everyone's got their ideal extra skill. And then versus a perfect Artian, you lose that 5 raw and that 5% affinity, which well, everyone's case, given how raw-focused the meta currently is, and there's no real threatening, super-elementally weak monsters to try and change that yet, we are in a position where this has come in just under your Artians. But that's not all doom and gloom, or at least in the future it won't be. If we look at something like the Dual Blades, 250 Thunder is really meaty. That is nice. Which, compared to Artian, is a tiny bit less. You get that 270 element. So, if you were to then perfectly roll this Artian, you'd gain 20 raw, you'd do 4 attacks up to 225, and then you'd get a sharpness because Dual Blades needs the help, and we're now looking at a weapon that is just still, even in the most elemental weapons of cases, strictly worse than a Thunder Artian perfectly rolled. So it does come down to this convert thunder resistance. If it absolutely skyrockets your element to the point that by itself it can nearly cap you, so all your armor skills and weapon skills can still be raw and you get the best of both worlds, and it's just so much element that it tips the balance. Look, numerically, this is easy to explain. For every 1 thunder res that you get on a slower weapon like Greatsword, you get 5 thunder elements. So right now, I have 550 thunder element, 55 true element. If I put on the simple hope mask, that will give me 1 thunder res, and then if we have a look, I have gone from 550 to 555. Kinda simple, kinda straightforward. If I do something like put on the full Lagiacrus armor set, well, we're now going to gain 100 element, or 10 true element, from 550 to 650. And there is no real cap on this. Outside of, obviously, the element cap, which you still have to take into consideration when you're pumping elements. So the obvious question then is, okay, so Thunder Resist 3. It's a level 1 slot skill. You really can't get damage out of level 1s apart from, like, antivirus. So does this then let you use this as a nice offensive option? I mean, yes, we've now gone from 20 Thunder Res to 40 Thunder Res, which will make me gain an extra 100 element to 750. 250. So 75 true element. That is a lot. Getting 10 true element or 100 bloated from just putting in level 3 thunder resistance is actually quite an efficient use of 1 slots and a decent power gain, at least elementally speaking. That has got potential. That's kinda nice. That is a lot better than Slicked Blade, Mizutsune. But if we then go over to our dual blades, for example, where we're sat at that initial 250, if I gain the 1 thunder resist here, it is only a gain of 4 instead of the 5, which really isn't that much lower, and relatively is better for the dual blades with how fast they attack and how much better they are at applying element than the greatsword. So this means that every 20 thunder resist, you're going to gain 80 element or 8 true element, which again is quite nice. And to put in perspective the quite niceness of it, if we head over here, get rid of all Hopi Mask, and put on something very straightforward like level 3 thunder attack and have a look at what that does for us, we go from the 250 to the 360. So a nice gain of 110 element. If we then instead do it via Thunder Resist with the charm, so the armor isn't getting in the way, it's just a straight 20 Thunder Resist, well, we go from that 250 to 330. Which is obviously still really, really nice. That's that gain of 8 true element for that level 3 Thunder Resist. So in that regard, it's actually not that uncomparable to level 3 element attack. 80 versus your 11. So that's very, very close. So that's kind of the way you want to look at this. Convert Thunder Resistance basically turns level 3 Thunder Resist across the weapons on average into a level 3 Thunder Attack that's about 80% as effective, which for using level 1 slots that might otherwise be useless in most builds is pretty damn decent. But again, we are in this situation where we don't really need to or want to push element because there isn't a monster to do that against to tip that over the edge versus raw even on dual blades. So it's certainly an interesting one. And to hammer it home then, we're up to 40 Thunder Resist on top of 3 Thunder Attack. We're skyrocketing it up to 920, again without any other element skills helping. And of course you can apply this across the weapons. So it does add a extra lovely dimension to pumping thunder damage with a method that you otherwise couldn't use and doesn't really come at much opportunity cost outside of, you know, having to use a Lagiacrus weapon. So the bottom line here is Convert Thunder Resistance is a really powerful skill. It basically reading gain 8 true element for level 3 Thunder Resist is strong enough to be worth using in a vacuum if you could just add it to a set. But you can't because you gotta use the Lagiacrus weapon. For now. And here's why I said it's not doom and gloom, at least future-wise. We know that in Free Title Update 3, we are getting a new talisman system that can RNG get skills, including those exclusive to weapons and armor. Weapons being the operative word there. So if we can get a randomly rolled talisman that has something like Convert Thunder Resistance and then maybe a weakness exploit and some good slots, well then suddenly that's kind of exciting, because by the wording of the skill, it should increase any element on your weapon by increasing your thunder resist, which suddenly makes it quite potent if we start to get properly difficult element weak monsters, and is a really sort of one to watch in a world where we can get this outside of specifically Lagiacrus weapons. So admittedly that may be optimistic, because in a world where we can get anything now on a talisman randomly, there's going to be more than likely more valuable options depending on how it's configured and a better way to use the space, so there is that to consider. So bottom line, In a vacuum, it's a pretty damn nifty, strong elemental skill. However, the game doesn't really have much monster support for strong elemental skills as things currently stand, but in the future that might change, and it also might change in a way that lets us use this without Lagiacrus weapons, and that perfect storm might enable it to really shine. But as it currently stands, it's just good, it's fun, you can do a lot worse than actually use Lagiacrus weapon for the fun, it's really close to the actual tippy top, and all in all, it's at least exciting as opposed to kind of dead on arrival like Mizutsune's slicked blade. Now then, the armor set bonus. Here is where things get both better and worse. Leviathan's Fury Azure Bolt 1 and 2. So, increase your affinity temporarily and deal some extra thunder damage on build-up, excludes some attacks, so we do have the kind of old flare and convert element just sort of weirdly not working on weapons movesets. Though that said, so far it seems to be fairly consistent, so I do wonder what it's specifically excluding. And then your 2 set is a further increase to the thunder damage pop and extend the duration of the affinity increase. So that's curious then. It reads sort of like you want to trigger it and then just enjoy the extra affinity for as long as possible. The thunder damage is a bonus, but the affinity is why you're going to use this skill. Like triggering latent power, or of course overcoming the frenzy with antivirus and getting that chunk of affinity for a while. And I say that very deliberately because competing with Gore 2 set is what this has to do. So here we are with just the 2 set on with a base weapon in the standard Hope Greatsword. So when you attack the monster, you will notice this extra little shimmer of thunder despite my weapon not having thunder. It's a very clear effect, and that's how you know the attack that you're using is triggering this. Now, I've only done 2 draw slashes. If I do a third, pop, we get 51 bonus damage, a lovely little splash effect, and now it has triggered. See, that didn't take long at all, literally 3 attacks. The actual activation window of this is very quick, and therefore uptime is going to be high, right? So, what's it done for me? It's given me 15% affinity. You saw we went up to that 25%. But how long does that actually last for? Well, as you can see, it's just told me that Azure Bolt 1 has worn off. Now, if I attack during this, you'll see I'm not getting any kind of thundery, splashy effects anymore, despite the skill having worn off. Well, that's because there is, and I absolutely hate that I have to say this, Thunderbolt 1 can now be activated, a cooldown. So close. Let me give you some numbers then. When you activate the 2 set bonus, you will gain 15% affinity. That 15% affinity lasts for 20 seconds. The cooldown then on being able to apply it again is, and once again, I can't exaggerate how sad this is, 30 seconds, which is a long time. That means, including time to activate, this is probably going to be up for, let's say, 25 seconds of every minute 60 seconds, which isn't fantastic, I'll be honest, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In a vacuum, getting a pop of damage, getting 15% affinity, that is pretty damn good. 15% affinity is the same that Overcoming Frenzy gives you. Obviously, Antivirus pushes it to 25% when it's a level 1 slot, which is why, you know, Gore has dominated and will continue to dominate. But 2 slot to Lagiacrus is reasonably competitive if that cooldown wasn't there. But before we get into that in too much detail, if I switch to a perfect Artian and do the same thing, the damage pop was 51 with a base Hope, and here it's 51 once again. The damage is consistent, and it doesn't matter what weapon you're using. unless you're using a weapon with thunder element. So now I've got my 780 thunder element. If I trigger it again, remember it was 51 on my perfect artian, and now it's going to come out as 58. So it does scale a little bit with your base thunder element there, which is certainly nice. So let's upgrade to the faucet, which we now have here. So this, what it does is amp that pop of thunder damage and then just let you keep that 15% affinity for longer. So first, how does it amp the thunder damage? So we had 51 with the 2 set with the perfect artian, and if I now trigger it with the 4 set with the same weapon, you're going to see a pop of 120. And that is consistent, and once again, it is affected by element on your weapon if I switch to Lagiacrus. So 120 without the thunder element, and now if I trigger it again, we're going to see a slightly higher pop of 136. It's nothing crazy, no one is going to be using this, stacking thunder element and going to town with the damage pop, so yeah, the damage really is just a bonus. This is about giving yourself consistent affinity, and I kinda just let the cat out the bag there. When you go to the 4 set versus the 2 set, well, you extend the time that you have that 15% affinity from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. You still then have a 30-second cooldown before you can activate it again, which is not great. But before we get into just how not great, let's try and trigger it with your jewel blades, and you'll see that some attacks certainly don't, but look, still very, very quick. There's your 120 pop of damage. It very much seems weapon agnostic, the actual damage that you get, and then we gain our 15% affinity for our 30 seconds with the 4 set and 20 seconds with the 2 set. So just to make things very, very clear, here is your actual numbers across the option, what everything does, so you can take it in and, easily understand. And here's a bow as well, just for some completionist sake. You'll see that it also, there it is, 120, does not take very long to activate, so the except sung attacks does seem to be very much some in this case, which is nice. In any case then, let's look at the bottom line here. We have a 2 set bonus, and I'm only really going to talk about the 2 set bonus meta-wise because you're not going to be wearing 4 pieces of Lagiacrus armor. You're just simply not. The set pieces aren't that good enough compared to missing out on something like Guts from Arch-Tempered Raidao, or indeed your classic gore magala. However, 2 of these pieces are certainly worth using, especially if the 2 set is worth using. We've got some good skills and good decoration economy across this set, and I could totally have seen a world where you do 2 set Lagiacrus, 2 set Gore, and then a 5th piece, or 3 set Arch-Tempered Raidao and 2 piece Lagiacrus. The potential was certainly there. As it currently stands, though, we have a 2 set bonus that means, let's say you're going to take about 5 seconds on average to trigger it. You do around 50 bonus damage, and then you gain 15% affinity for 20 seconds. That, as a parcel, is really good. That is competitive with Gore Magala. The pops of damage make up for the 10% affinity you're losing from antivirus, not completely, but they certainly help, and then you're getting these efficient Lagiacrus pieces as well compared to the Gore Magala pieces. Not that Gore Magala pieces aren't great, they have great slots, but their raw skills aren't as good. We're using it for the set bonus. If it ended there, I would be saying, wow, okay, yeah, Lagiacrus is looking solid. We need to do some actual build craft, but in terms of the raw numbers, getting a like 80% uptime or more, 15% affinity with some bonus pops of damage, we can work with that. But it has that 30-second cooldown before you can activate it again. So let's be generous and say that you activate it instantly as soon as it goes down. That gives it a 50% uptime in a minute, which is 7.5% affinity on average, and, well, one activation of damage, so like 50 damage per minute, which is obviously kind of garbage, and doesn't compete with Gore Magala at all. Now, unless they've stealth nerfed Gore Magala 2 sets, which wasn't in the patch notes and doesn't seem to have happened, this sadly is going to struggle. I don't know why it has this 30-second cooldown. It arguably wouldn't be better even if it didn't have it. It would be competitive, certainly, but that's good. But with it, well, that's the almost in the almost OP, because if it didn't have that cooldown, it'd be there. It'd be so there. Good pieces, good bonus. We can change things up. Gore no more. But it does. It's almost. It's so close, but not close enough. I hope they lessen or remove the cooldown. Maybe in a future patch. That seems unlikely, but as it currently stands, it's not bad. What I will say for the set bonuses and the armor is there is a potential world in which Lagiacrus armor is efficient enough to let you get more total skills that it's worth breaking up the Gore 2 set for. And then the Lagiacrus 2 set is just like a bonus, like Latent Power was on the Arch-Tempered Raidal that still has an effect, but it's not, specifically the reason. Potentially that might happen, but we're not going to be breaking up the Gore 2 set for the Lagiacrus 2 set is the main bottom line take here in a specific side grade upgrade situation. So your weapon skill for Lagiacrus is pretty damn good. It's only really ruined by the game not having any severely threatening super weak thunder monsters, and of course the weapon itself that it's tied to, at least right now until Title Update 3 potentially, just not competing quite enough with Artian, that classic tail. And then the set bonus, its actual effect is fantastic and competitive, but its cooldown kinda shoots it in the foot before it can start running the race with Gore. So close, yet so far. Let me know what you guys think then. Let me know your thoughts on all this, how you're feeling about it. But for now, look forward to the seregios equipment test, because there is a lot of exciting potential there, let me tell you. For now then, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.